If you're second in line to rule North Korea, you don't get to retire, you disappear. And the ways they've disappeared will keep you up at night. Before we begin, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. North Korea is one of the most secretive countries on Earth. 3 generations of the Kim family have ruled it with absolute power since 1948. But here's something most people don't know. For every Kim who sits on the throne, there's always someone waiting in the wings. A backup, a second choice. And being that backup is basically a death sentence. We're talking about uncles who were executed with anti-aircraft guns, brothers who were assassinated in airports with chemical weapons, relatives who just vanished from history like they never existed. This isn't some medieval drama. This happened in our lifetime. Some of it happened just a few years ago. Today, we're going deep into the dark world of North Korean succession. We're going to look at every single person who was ever close to power but didn't quite make it. And we're going to see exactly what happened to them. Because in the Kim family, there's no such thing as a peaceful retirement. So why does being the backup leader of North Korea suck so much? Why can't you just live a comfortable life as a wealthy relative of the supreme leader? Why does it always end in death or exile? The answer comes down to one simple fact. In a dictatorship, you're either the person with all the power or you're a threat to the person with all the power. There's no middle ground. Think about it. If you're the brother of the supreme leader, you have the same bloodline. You have the same claim to power. You probably have supporters in the military or the government who prefer you. And that makes you dangerous, even if you never wanted power. Even if you're perfectly happy living a quiet life, your very existence is a threat. Because in North Korea, succession isn't decided by laws or elections. It's decided by whoever has the most support from the military and the Workers' Party. And if people start thinking that maybe you'd be a better leader than the current guy, well, that's a problem.
A problem that usually gets solved with a bullet. This is the curse of being in the Kim family. You're born into unimaginable wealth and privilege. You have access to things most North Koreans can't even dream of. But you're also born into a world where your own relatives might kill you to protect their power. And it's been this way since the very beginning. Let's start at the beginning, with Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea and the grandfather of the current leader. Kim Il-sung came to power in 1948 after Korea was divided at the end of World War II. The North went to the Communists, backed by the Soviet Union. The South went to the capitalists, backed by the United States. And Kim Il-sung became the leader of the North. Now, Kim Il-sung didn't have brothers who threatened his power, but he had something just as dangerous: rivals. People who had fought alongside him during the war. People who thought they deserved to be leader just as much as he did. And Kim Il-sung dealt with them brutally. In the 1950s and 1960s, he systematically purged anyone who might challenge him. Military generals, party officials, people who had been his comrades. He accused them of being spies or traitors. He had them executed or sent to prison camps. And slowly, methodically, he eliminated every single person who could have been an alternative to his rule. By the time he was done, there was nobody left who could challenge him. He had created a cult of personality around himself. He was the great leader, the eternal president, almost a god, and anyone who questioned that was destroyed. But Kim Il-sung had a problem. He was getting old, and he needed to pass power to someone. He needed a successor. He had 2 sons, Kim Jong-il and Kim Pyong-il. And here's where the backup leader problem really begins. Kim Jong-il was the older son. He was born in 1941. And from early on, Kim Il-sung was grooming him to take over. He gave him positions in the government. He built up his image. He made sure everyone knew that Kim Jong-il was going to be the next leader. But Kim Pyong-il existed. And that was a problem.
Kim Pyong-il was the younger son, born in 1954. And apparently, he looked a lot like his father. He had his father's features, his mannerisms, Some people in North Korea actually preferred him. They thought he'd make a better leader than Kim Jong-il. Now, Kim Jong-il never openly challenged his brother. He never tried to take power. But he didn't have to. Just by existing, just by being another option, he was a threat. So what did Kim Jong-il do? He couldn't kill his own brother. That would be too obvious, too brutal, even by North Korean standards. So instead, he exiled him. In 1979, Kim Jong-il was sent to Hungary as a diplomat, then Finland, then Bulgaria, then Poland, then Czech Republic. He spent nearly 40 years living in Europe, far away from North Korea, unable to return home. He wasn't allowed to come back until 2019, when his brother Kim Jong-il was long dead, and his nephew Kim Jong-un was firmly in power. And by then, Kim Jong-il was an old man, no threat to anyone. That was one of the more merciful ways the Kim family dealt with backup leaders. Just exile them, send them far away where they can't cause problems. But not everyone got off that easy. Kim Jong-il officially became the supreme leader in 1994 when his father died, but really, he'd been running things behind the scenes for years. And just like his father, he had to deal with the problem of succession. Kim Jong-il had 3 sons, Kim Jong-nam, Kim Jong-chul, and Kim Jong-un. And this is where things get really dark. Kim Jong-nam was the oldest, born in 1971 to Kim Jong-il's first mistress. And for a while, it looked like he was going to be the heir. He was the firstborn son. He had the right bloodline. He was being prepared for leadership. But Kim Jong-nam had a problem. He liked the outside world a little too much. In 2001, he tried to sneak into Japan using a fake passport. He wanted to visit Tokyo Disneyland. Can you imagine the heir to the North Korean throne trying to sneak into Japan to ride roller coasters? He got caught at the airport. It was humiliating, not just for him, but for his father. And that was basically the end of Kim Jong-nam's political career. After that, Kim Jong-il basically wrote him off. Kim Jong-nam was allowed to leave North Korea. He lived in Macau, a city in China. He lived in Singapore. He traveled around Asia, living off family money. But he was never allowed to come back to North Korea in any official capacity. And here's the thing about Kim Jong-nam. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He gave interviews where he said he didn't even want to be the leader. He said North Korea needed reform, needed to open up to the world. But he wasn't plotting a coup or anything like that. But that didn't matter, because he was still a threat. He was still the oldest son, still had a claim to power. And as long as he was alive, he was a problem. We'll come back to what happened to Kim Jong-nam later, because his story doesn't have a happy ending. Kim Jong-chul was the second son, born in 1981. And for a while, he was considered as a possible heir. But apparently, Kim Jong-il thought he was too soft, too feminine, not strong enough to rule North Korea with an iron fist. So Kim Jong-chul was passed over. He was allowed to live in North Korea, but he was never given any real power. He became a musician. He likes Eric Clapton, apparently. He's been spotted at Eric Clapton concerts in Europe, living a relatively quiet life. And that's probably the smartest thing he ever did. By accepting that he wasn't going to be the leader, by not causing problems, by just being a private citizen, he's managed to stay alive. He's not in power, but he's not dead either. Then there's Kim Jong-un, the youngest son, born in 1984. And he's the one who got picked. Why? Well, apparently Kim Jong-il thought he had the right personality. He was ruthless enough, strong enough, ambitious enough. He had what it took to be a dictator. So starting around 2008 or 2009, Kim Jong-il started preparing Kim Jong-un to take over. He gave him military positions, introduced him to party officials, made sure everyone knew that this was the guy who was going to be the next supreme leader. And in 2011, when Kim Jong-il died of a heart attack, Kim Jong-un took over. He was only 27 years old, one of the youngest leaders in the world. And he inherited a country with nuclear weapons, a massive military, and a population of 25 million people. But he also inherited a problem, the backup leader problem. Because he had an older brother living in exile who technically had a stronger claim to power. When Kim Jong-un took power in 2011, he was young, he was inexperienced, and a lot of people in North Korea's government probably didn't take him seriously. They probably thought he was just a kid who could be controlled. So Kim Jong-un had to prove himself. He had to show everyone that he was in charge, that he was just as ruthless as his father and grandfather. And he did that by purging anyone who might be a threat. The first major purge happened in 2013, and the target was his own uncle. Jang Song-taek was married to Kim Jong-un's aunt. He was a high-ranking official in the North Korean government, and he had been a mentor to Kim Jong-un when he was younger. He helped him learn the ropes, helped him prepare to take power. But Jang Song-taek was also powerful. Too powerful. He had his own network of supporters, his own allies in the military and the party, and some people thought maybe he was the one really running things behind the scenes. Kim Jong-un couldn't allow that. So in December 2013, Jang Song-taek was arrested. He was dragged out of a government meeting by armed guards, and he was accused of treason, corruption, and trying to overthrow the government. The trial was a show trial. The outcome was decided before it even started. Jang Song-taek was found guilty, and he was executed. Now, here's where it gets really brutal. According to some reports, which are hard to verify but come from usually reliable sources, Jang Song-taek wasn't just shot. He was executed with an anti-aircraft gun. That's a gun designed to shoot down planes, used on a human being.
Why would they do that? To send a message, to make it as brutal and terrifying as possible, to show everyone in North Korea what happens when you threaten Kim Jong-un's power. And it didn't stop with Jang Song-taek. His entire family was purged. His relatives were arrested. Some were executed. Others were sent to prison camps. Kim Jong-un wanted to wipe out Jang Song-taek's entire lineage, to make sure nobody from that family could ever come back and challenge him. This is how dictators consolidate power. They don't just get rid of their enemies, they destroy them completely. They make examples out of them, and they create an atmosphere of fear where nobody dares to challenge them. But Kim Jong-un still had one more problem: his older brother, Kim Jong-nam. Kim Jong-nam had been living in exile for years. He was in Macau, living a comfortable life. He wasn't involved in North Korean politics. He wasn't plotting anything. He just wanted to be left alone. But Kim Jong-un saw him as a threat, because as long as Kim Jong-nam was alive, he was an alternative. If there was ever a coup, if anyone ever wanted to replace Kim Jong-un, they could put Kim Jong-nam in power and claim he was the legitimate heir. So Kim Jong-un decided to eliminate that possibility permanently. On February 13, 2017, Kim Jong-nam was at Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. He was about to catch a flight to Macau. He was walking through the terminal, probably thinking about nothing in particular, and then two women approached him. One of them grabbed him from behind. The other one rubbed something on his face, and then they ran away. Kim Jong-nam immediately felt sick. He went to the airport's medical clinic. He told them someone had grabbed him and sprayed something on his face. He was sweating. He was having trouble breathing. Within 20 minutes, he was dead. An autopsy later revealed that he'd been poisoned with VX nerve agent. That's one of the most deadly chemical weapons ever created. A tiny drop on your skin is enough to kill you. It shuts down your nervous system. You can't breathe. Your muscles stop working, and you die. The two women who attacked Kim Jong-nam were arrested. They claimed they thought they were participating in a prank show. They said men had hired them to spray people with what they thought was baby oil or perfume as part of a TV show. They had no idea they were carrying a lethal chemical weapon. And maybe that's true. Maybe they were just dupes. Because the real masterminds behind the assassination were North Korean agents. Men who had traveled to Malaysia specifically for this mission. Men who had planned every detail. After the attack, these men fled Malaysia immediately. They went to the North Korean embassy and then were evacuated back to North Korea. They were never arrested, never faced justice, because North Korea protected them.
The whole thing was an international incident. Malaysia expelled North Korean diplomats. Countries around the world condemned North Korea. The United Nations investigated it. But Kim Jong-un got what he wanted. His older brother was dead. The backup leader was gone. And he sent a message to everyone else in his family. Nobody is safe. No matter where you are in the world, no matter how far away you run, if you're a threat to me, I will find you, and I will kill you. This is the reality of being in the Kim family. Your own relatives will hunt you down and murder you in a public place. And they'll use chemical weapons banned by international law to do it. Kim Jong-nam's death was one of the most brazen political assassinations in modern history. It happened in broad daylight, in a busy international airport, on camera. And North Korea did it anyway, because they knew they could get away with it.
But it's not just direct family members who have to worry. Anyone close to power in North Korea is at risk. Over the years, Kim Jong-un has purged hundreds of officials, generals, party members, government ministers, anyone he sees as disloyal or incompetent or threatening. In 2015, Kim Jong-un's defense minister, Hyun Yong-chol, was executed. The reports say he was killed with an anti-aircraft gun in front of hundreds of people. His crime? Falling asleep during a meeting that Kim Jong-un was attending. Now, we can't verify all these stories. North Korea is so secretive that it's hard to know exactly what happens inside the country. But these reports come from South Korean intelligence, from defectors, from people who have connections inside North Korea, and the pattern is clear. People disappear. People get executed, and it happens regularly. There's a famous case of a North Korean general who was purged, then reappeared, then disappeared again, then reappeared again. His name is Ri Yong-gil. In 2016, South Korean intelligence reported that he'd been executed, but then a few months later, he showed up at a public event, very much alive. What happened? Did South Korean intelligence get it wrong? Or was he executed and then someone with the same name took his place? Or did he survive some kind of punishment and get rehabilitated? We don't know, and that's the terrifying part. In North Korea, you can disappear and reappear, and nobody knows why. Kim Jong-un's own half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, had said in interviews before he died that he lived in constant fear. He said he knew his younger brother wanted him dead. He knew that North Korean agents were probably watching him. He just didn't know when they'd make their move. And he was right to be afraid, because they did make their move, and he died alone in an airport, killed by a weapon that causes one of the most painful deaths imaginable. This is what it means to be a backup leader in North Korea. You live in fear. You watch your back constantly. You never know who you can trust. And eventually, if you're unlucky, you end up dead.
So, where does that leave us today? Kim Jong-un is firmly in power. He's eliminated all the obvious threats. His older brother is dead. His uncle is dead. Anyone who might have challenged him has been purged or exiled or killed. But here's the thing. Kim Jong-un is still relatively young. He's only in his late 30s, but he's not healthy. He smokes, he drinks, he's overweight. There have been reports of him having health problems. In 2020, he disappeared from public view for several weeks, and there were rumors he was seriously ill or even dead. He's fine, obviously. He's still running the country. But those health scares raise an important question. What happens when Kim Jong-un dies? Who takes over? He has 3 children, but they're all young. The oldest is probably only around 10 or 11 years old, way too young to run a country. So if Kim Jong-un died tomorrow, who would take over? Would it be one of his children, with a regent ruling in their place until they're old enough? Would it be one of his siblings? His sister, Kim Yo-jong, is often mentioned as a possible successor. She's been given more and more responsibility in recent years. She's appeared at major events. She's clearly being positioned as someone important. But if Kim Yo-jong became the leader, what would happen to Kim Jong-un's children when they grew up? Would they be allowed to live, or would they be seen as threats and eliminated? This is the cycle that never ends in North Korea.
Every generation, the same thing happens. Someone comes to power, they eliminate anyone who might challenge them, they rule with absolute authority, and then when they die, the whole thing starts over again. And the backup leaders, the people who are second in line, they always lose. They either get exiled or purged or killed. There's no retirement plan. There's no peaceful handover of power. There's just violence and fear.
Let's talk about what it's actually like to grow up in the Kim family. Because from the outside, it might seem amazing. You're born into the ruling family of an entire country. You have access to wealth, luxury, anything you want. But the reality is much darker. If you're born into the Kim family, you're basically born into a prison. Yes, it's a very luxurious prison. You have mansions, cars, servants, imported food and clothes that regular North Koreans could never even imagine. But you're still trapped. You can't leave the country without permission. You can't speak freely. You can't make your own choices about your life. Everything you do is watched. Everything you say is monitored, because the regime needs to make sure you're loyal, that you're not planning anything, that you're not a threat. And the consequences of stepping out of line are severe. We've seen that. Kim Jong-nam wanted to visit Disneyland, and it basically ended his political career. Jang Song-thaek accumulated too much power, and he was executed. Any misstep, any sign of disloyalty, and you're done. So yeah, you have material wealth, but you don't have freedom. When you're a dictator, you can't trust anyone. Not your advisors, not your generals, not even your family. Because everyone around you wants something from you. Everyone has their own agenda. And you know that if you show any weakness, if you make any mistakes, someone will try to take your power away. This creates a mindset of constant vigilance. You see threats everywhere, and you have to eliminate those threats before they become real problems. And here's the thing about family members. They're the most dangerous threats of all, because they have legitimacy. They have the bloodline. They have connections. If someone wants to stage a coup, putting a family member in power is the easiest way to do it, because you can claim it's just restoring the proper line of succession. So from a dictator's perspective, family members aren't loved ones. They're potential rivals. They're threats that need to be managed. And in North Korea, where the cult of personality around the Kim family is so strong, where the idea of the Paektu bloodline is sacred, family members are even more dangerous, because they have the same claim to divinity that the current leader has. Kim Il-sung understood this, Kim Jong-il understood this, and Kim Jong-un definitely understands this. That's why they've all been so brutal in eliminating potential rivals. It's not because they're evil or sadistic, though they might be those things too. It's because they're paranoid. They're protecting their power by any means necessary. And in a system where there are no checks on power, where there's no rule of law, where the leader's word is absolute, that paranoia leads to terrible things. Executions, assassinations, purges, all in the name of maintaining control. North Korea isn't the only dictatorship where this happens. Throughout history, we've seen leaders kill their own family members to protect their power. In ancient Rome, emperors regularly had their relatives executed. Nero killed his own mother. Caligula killed his cousins. It was just part of how power worked. In the Soviet Union, Stalin didn't kill his family, but he purged thousands of party members, including people who had been his closest allies. Anyone he saw as a threat was eliminated.
In Iraq, Saddam Hussein had his own son-in-law killed. The guy had defected to Jordan, then came back to Iraq thinking he'd be forgiven. He was executed within days. In Libya, Gaddafi's son Mutassim was killed during the revolution that overthrew his father. His brother Saif was captured and imprisoned. In Syria, the Assad family has maintained power for decades, but they've also eliminated rivals within their own extended family and clan. So this pattern isn't unique to North Korea.
It's a feature of dictatorships in general. When power is absolute and there are no institutions to manage succession peacefully, violence becomes the default method of dealing with potential rivals. But North Korea takes it to an extreme. The level of brutality, the willingness to assassinate family members in foreign countries, the complete elimination of anyone who might be a threat, it's on a different level from most other dictatorships. And that's because North Korea is so isolated. There's no international pressure that can really change their behavior. There's no internal pressure either, because the population is so controlled. So the Kim family can do whatever they want, and there are no consequences. Some members of the Kim family have managed to escape. They've defected to other countries. And their stories give us a window into what life is really like in that family. One of the most famous defectors is Ko Young-hwee's niece. Ko Young-hwee was Kim Jong-il's consort and Kim Jong-un's mother. Her niece managed to defect to the United States in 1998. She's lived in the US ever since, under a different name, in hiding. She's given interviews where she talks about what it was like growing up connected to the Kim family. She said everything was monitored. Everyone was paranoid. You couldn't trust anyone, even your own family members, because they might report you if you said the wrong thing. She said the wealth and luxury were real. They had access to imported goods, nice clothes, good food. But it came with a price: complete loyalty to the regime, complete submission to the Kim family's authority.
And she said she knew that if she ever stepped out of line, she'd be punished. Maybe not killed because she was just the niece, not a direct threat, but imprisoned, sent to a labor camp, tortured. The regime had ways of dealing with people who didn't fall in line. So she defected. She escaped. And she's been living in hiding ever since, because she's afraid North Korea might try to kill her like they killed Kim Jong-nam. There are other defectors too, lower-level officials, people who worked in the government, and they all tell similar stories. Fear, paranoia, constant monitoring, and the knowledge that if you make one wrong move, you and your entire family could be destroyed. This is the reality of life in North Korea, and it's especially true if you're connected to the Kim family, because you're not just a citizen, you're a potential threat, and you have to prove your loyalty every single day. One of the ways the Kim family maintains control is through propaganda. They've built up a cult of personality around the supreme leader that's almost religious in nature. From birth, North Koreans are taught that the Kim family is divine, that Kim Il-sung was a godlike figure who liberated Korea from Japanese rule, that Kim Jong-il had supernatural powers like the ability to control the weather, that Kim Jong-un is a genius who knows everything and can do anything. None of this is true, obviously, but in North Korea, questioning it is treason. You can be imprisoned just for expressing doubt about the official mythology. And this propaganda serves a purpose. It makes it impossible for anyone else in the family to claim legitimacy. Because if Kim Jong-un is this divine figure, this genius leader, then how could anyone else possibly replace him? How could his brother or his uncle or anyone else have the same authority?
So the propaganda isn't just about controlling the population. It's also about eliminating rivals. Because if you're seen as divine, if you're seen as irreplaceable, then nobody else can challenge you. And that's why the backup leaders have to be eliminated. Because even if they don't want power, even if they're perfectly happy living quiet lives, their very existence challenges the propaganda. Their existence suggests that maybe Kim Jong-un isn't so special. Maybe someone else could do the job just as well. And a dictatorship can't allow that kind of thinking. So the backup leaders have to go. We need to talk about what happens to the families of purged officials. Because in North Korea, punishment doesn't just affect the individual. It affects 3 generations. This is called 3 generations of punishment. If you commit a crime, your parents, your children, and your grandchildren are also punished, even if they had nothing to do with what you did. So when someone like Jong Song-taek is executed, his entire family suffers. They're arrested, they're sent to political prison camps, and they spend the rest of their lives in those camps, doing forced labor, starving, being tortured. North Korea has an entire system of prison camps spread across the country. These aren't normal prisons. They're more like concentration camps. People are worked to death. They're given minimal food. They're beaten and tortured. And most people who go in never come out. According to defectors who've escaped from these camps, the conditions are horrific. People eat rats and insects to survive. They're forced to work in coal mines or logging camps in brutal conditions. Guards kill prisoners for minor infractions. Women are raped. Children are born in the camps and grow up knowing nothing but slavery. And this is what happens to the families of backup leaders who are eliminated. They don't just lose their relative. They lose their own freedom. They lose their lives.
This system serves two purposes. First, it punishes the families of those who threaten the regime. Second, it creates a powerful deterrent. Because if you know that challenging the supreme leader will result in your entire family being destroyed, you're a lot less likely to do it. It's evil. It's cruel beyond imagination. But it's effective. And that's why the Kim family keeps using it. So let's come back to the question of succession. What happens when Kim Jong-un dies or becomes unable to rule? This is actually a really important question because Kim Jong-un is relatively young, but he's not healthy. And if something happened to him, North Korea could descend into chaos. The most likely successor right now is his sister, Kim Yo-jong. She's been given more and more responsibility over the years. She's appeared at major events, both in North Korea and internationally. She's been involved in diplomacy with South Korea and the United States. She's clearly being positioned as someone important. But would the North Korean military and government accept a woman as supreme leader? North Korea is a very patriarchal society. All the leaders so far have been men. Would they be willing to follow a woman? Maybe, if Kim Jong-un explicitly designates her as his successor, if she has the support of key power players in the military and the Workers' Party, if she's ruthless enough to eliminate anyone who challenges her. But it's not guaranteed. There could be a power struggle. Different factions might support different people, and that could lead to instability or even civil war. Another possibility is that Kim Jong-un's children take over, with Kim Yo-jong serving as regent until they're old enough to rule. This is similar to what happened when Kim Jong-un took over. He was young and inexperienced, so older officials helped guide him in the beginning. But again, this is risky. Regencies are always unstable because the regent has real power, but not the legitimacy of the bloodline, so they're vulnerable to being overthrown.
And here's the really scary part. If there is a power struggle, if different factions start fighting for control, what happens to North Korea's nuclear weapons? Who controls them? Could they be used in an internal conflict? Could they fall into the hands of someone even worse than Kim Jong-un? These are questions that keep intelligence analysts up at night, because North Korea has between 40 and 50 nuclear weapons according to most estimates. And if the country becomes unstable, those weapons become a huge danger, not just to North Korea, but to the entire world. So the succession question isn't just important for North Korea, it's important for global security. And that brings us back to the backup leader problem. Because if Kim Jong-un had allowed his brother to live, if he had other family members who could step in if something happened to him, the succession would be more stable. There would be clear alternatives. But because he's eliminated all potential rivals, because there are no backup leaders, the succession is uncertain, and that uncertainty is dangerous. So in a way, Kim Jong-un's paranoia, his need to eliminate threats, has made his own regime less stable. He's removed the safety valves that could have helped North Korea transition to a new leader peacefully. And when he dies, whether that's tomorrow or in 30 years, North Korea is going to face a crisis, and we have no idea how it's going to turn out. The international community has been trying to deal with North Korea for decades, and one of the strategies has been to support potential alternatives to the current regime. After Kim Jong-un was assassinated, some people suggested that he could have been used as a figurehead for a government in exile, that if there was ever a coup or a collapse of the regime, he could have been installed as a more moderate leader. Obviously, that's not possible anymore because he's dead. But the idea reveals something important about how other countries think about North Korea. They're always looking for alternatives, always hoping that maybe there's someone in the Kim family or the North Korean elite who could take over and be more reasonable. But the problem is, the Kim family has made sure there are no alternatives. Anyone who can serve as an alternative has been eliminated or exiled.
And that makes North Korea even more dangerous. Because if the current regime falls, there's no clear successor. No one who has the legitimacy and the support to take over peacefully. So it would likely be chaos. The United States, South Korea, China, Japan, Russia, they all have an interest in North Korean stability. They don't want a collapse that could lead to war or a refugee crisis or loose nuclear weapons. But they also can't do much to influence what happens inside North Korea. The country is too isolated, too closed off. The Kim family has too much control. So the international community is basically stuck. They can impose sanctions, they can try diplomacy, but they can't change the fundamental dynamic of how North Korea works. And that means the backup leader problem is going to keep happening. Every generation, potential rivals are going to be eliminated. And every generation, North Korea is going to become more unstable, more unpredictable, more dangerous. So that's why it sucks to be the Kim family backup leader, because you're born into a situation where your only options are exile or death. If you're lucky, you get sent away to some foreign country where you live in comfortable isolation for the rest of your life. That's what happened to Kim Pyong-il, Kim Il-sung's younger son. 40 years in Europe, unable to come home. If you're unlucky, you get executed, maybe with an anti-aircraft gun in front of a crowd, maybe with a chemical weapon in an airport. Maybe you just disappear one day and nobody ever sees you again. There's no middle ground. There's no peaceful retirement. There's no option to just step aside and live a quiet life within North Korea. Because in a dictatorship, especially one as extreme as North Korea, your very existence is a threat. And the current leader, Kim Jong-un, has made this abundantly clear. He killed his uncle. He killed his brother. He's purged hundreds of officials. He sent countless people to prison camps, all to protect his power. Is he more paranoid than his father or grandfather? Maybe. Or maybe he's just more obvious about it. Maybe the previous generations did the same things but were better at hiding it. Either way, the message is clear. In the Kim family, there's only room for one leader. Everyone else is expendable. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Because this is how the system works. This is how dictatorships maintain power. Through fear, through violence, through the elimination of anyone who might be a threat. The tragedy is that most of these backup leaders never wanted power. Kim Jong-nam just wanted to live a normal life. Jong Song-thaek was loyal to the family for decades before he was executed. They weren't plotting coups. They weren't trying to overthrow anyone. But it didn't matter. Because in North Korea, intention doesn't matter. Only perception matters. And if you're perceived as a threat, even if you're not, you're going to be eliminated. This is the curse of being born into the Kim family. You have unimaginable privilege and wealth, but you also live with constant fear. You never know when you might say the wrong thing, make the wrong move, or just exist in a way that makes the supreme leader uncomfortable. And when that happens, you don't get a warning, you don't get a trial, you just disappear, or you die, and your family suffers for generations. So yeah, it really, really sucks to be the Kim family backup leader, because history shows that backups don't retire, they disappear, and they disappear in the most brutal ways imaginable.
The next time you hear about North Korea in the news, remember this. Behind the parades and the propaganda and the nuclear tests, there's a family tearing itself apart. There are people living in fear of their own relatives. There are children growing up knowing that their bloodline could be their death sentence. And as long as the Kim family stays in power, as long as North Korea remains a dictatorship, this cycle is going to continue. Generation after generation, backup leader after backup leader, all of them meeting the same fate. Hit subscribe to see what happens when power and paranoia collide.